Hi, everybody. I'm back, and welcome to the show with Ron, where we look at the context behind the headlines. Now, there's a lot out there in the world, as you probably realize, that's already been decided for you and me by the media, by the government, and it's always been like this. No need to be too cynical about it. And there's also a lot of AI jumble writing and just the facts reporting. So it all makes sense that we should try to add some context to this sort of thing and try to understand if there's a little history behind it, what it means behind what's being reported to us. So let's get right to it. Now, I choose Drudge because they bring up sensational stuff and they have a big influence on a lot of media outlets in the United States that actually hate Drudge, but they still use it to source good stories, clickbaity stories for the net. And here we have something that's lightly reported in the other news. Again, a screaming headline. It's like from a 1930s movie where the newspaper spins up to the camera with the sensational reporting, some kind of an outage, where most of the other media is reporting on this cool Odysseus spacecraft to land on the moon. Of course, I thought I kept up on all kinds of space stuff, but I didn't hear anything or know anything about that until today. It is amazing how minor this space story has become. Suppose that was the character of even the Apollo landings, the late 60s through the 70s, where the first one obviously was referenced a lot in the media and even in pop culture. And as each successive Apollo mission occurred, it kind of the glory of spacecraft, of men landing on the moon, the danger of it seemed to disappear. Maybe it became clear when there was really nothing up there. It was just dead rock. There's the interest waned, and so anyway, we're back on the moon. Okay. I always kind of like when these things happen, especially during peacetime or not in the middle of another crisis, because they will expose to big business or the United States vulnerabilities in their systems that they can fix before something bad happens. So, you might expect that a rogue state that's amping things up like North Korea, they might hack around and mess with things. But big adversaries of the United States like China or Russia, they wouldn't do this in peacetime because it would just expose their capabilities that they would need to use during a crisis situation. And it lets, like I say, what's the impact of this? It lets us know, hey, we got to fix this system so this doesn't happen. Probably is just a glitch. Who knows? The more complex these systems gets, the more vulnerability there seems to be. And wasn't it wonderful back in the day? It's gotten so complex just to make a phone call. Remember, we just had those wires, metal copper wires running everywhere. And if there was an outage, it was just because a tree fell on the line and knocked down a pole. I'm not sure what exactly we're completely gaining by putting everything into these ultra complex systems. We still need some old-fashioned analog ways to communicate, I think. Let's bring back shortwave radios. I loved those. We got some Chinese spyware. We got some all-time highs boosted by AI and chip buying from AI. And again, it's all smoke and mirrors. Worldwide feds all set to cut rates. They're going to make sure there is no recession this year, and the debt will soar. And some president in the future will have to deal with this. We got voters say Biden and Trump both mentally unfit. think Biden is obviously has senility. Trump, they use the word unhinged. A lot of the things he says I don't think befit the decorum that the Republicans have said they were a part of, that they represented for so many years. I'm not sure if all these supposed gaffes, you see, the media is trying to say, well, Biden he's senile, but sometimes Trump acts senile because he says crazy things. That's just Trump saying crazy things. I'm not sure if that's exactly down to dementia when he mistakes a word, but obviously the media is trying to mitigate how bad Biden obviously is his mental state. And it's a scary time when the two major parties in the United States, from the country that rules the world, it does, can only put forward those two choices. And it has nothing to do with the primary. The primary is set up by the political parties to put into place the right person, the person they think is going to win in the national election. For instance, that's why the Iowa primaries this year were split into two. The Democrats postponed it until, I think, next month, because obviously the Iowa primaries, it's a caucus actually, but they're in the primaries. It's often an outsider candidate that can come in and win in those, because a little candidate can game the system in the way that the caucuses work. So they wanted to make sure there was no chance of that happening this year. So long ago, they changed the timing of that. Just one example of how the primaries, that don't really judge the voters' will entirely. Now here we've got media talk. Whoops. I block, whoops, no, I didn't want to do that. I block these because in a lot of sites, we have a lot of infected toenails and gross out ads. I just don't want to see those, and I don't think anybody does either. Donor numbers, lower now. The media is picking these things out. It's possible that, here's another one about embarrassing low numbers for CPAC attendance. This is a MAGA thing. Here's Trump. I think the media first started promoting these very glaring photos of him because they wanted to portray him in a negative light, but his own people have embraced it. But, we saw this cheerleading and this mocking of Trump's low numbers way back during the 2016 election. It's kind of cheerleading by the media to say, ha, 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 he has no chance. Perhaps we're seeing a little of that this time, but I'm interested to see how much of it could be real, how much of the general voter who maybe sometimes votes Republican and sometimes votes Democrat, how much they are turned off by the statements Trump has made, the media implications that Trump is ready to become a dictator, blah blah blah, despite the denials of his side, and also the scale of these cases against him and the apparent wrongdoing, despite some of these cases being brought, they're for political reasons at a political time this year, but yet that doesn't mean they don't have substance behind them. So I'm interested to see how much of that is really impacting the voting public. And it's going to be hard to do because, again, the media is all set up to say, ha, 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 has no money, he has no followers. We've heard that before, and it didn't turn out very well for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Let's see. I don't know what it is about all these people who come out for like these far right wing causes. Here we've got, if you do something like this, you better be clean as a bean because they're going to dig into your past. And I don't know why all these people have ridiculous career-ending scandals in their resume first. I think some people would say because they're grifters and they're just jumping up into the position to lead these groups and be the public face of them. And that's, if you're a member of any group of any size, you have to be aware of your leaders, the type of people who are willing to do it these days. They might be people who don't have any morals and who just want to have power for power, or like online clout, as we often hear. People who just want attention on the internet. It's another, gosh, do you remember, I don't know, it's 10 years or so, Vice Media was all over the place. The incredible, stories, real attention-grabbing stories, and amazing, seemed to be cutting edge investigative journalism, and going to all these places around the world. And it seemed like they were going to undercut traditional media in a real way. And now they're gone. It does seem like in all of this downsizing of the media, this apocalypse of the media and this AI apocalypse that's going to hit the media, that some established organs of the media like New York Times or something should be able to carve out a place to say, we don't use AI, we have original articles, we have reporters who go out, we have reporters that are stationed in all these places doing real news, and that is a selling point to bring to people. Of course, every 2 or 3 years, you'll find the stories in the press about, after it was going to be expected, downsized, but now New York Times and Washington Post and LA Times, they have a great subscription model and they're making money and they're thriving. And then after a couple years, mass layoffs again. In some cases, ownership has changed in some of these newspapers. So it's a scary time for the media. This is unusual because I remember in college I had some law courses, and and it was about Supreme Court and about the 60s and doing Supreme Court briefs and about how big of an issue this hair thing was in the 60s, and where people were trying to all around the world, around the U.S., were trying to restrict the length of kids' hair. That this was an issue, and I believe these kind of cases were always kicked back from the Supreme Court with either the stated or implied implication that such an issue is not of the status that they are, or the Supreme Court is willing to hear these sorts of cases. But now that I'm old, I don't think anything of this. Yeah, let's cut everybody's hair. But if I were a kid, and I was a kid in the 70s with real long hair, big shaggy mop top, I would have been incensed by a case like this. I think anybody of age who is making these laws has to be aware of that. You sometimes have to put yourself in the position of a young person and not just say, I'm a practical old person and I used to care about it, I don't care anymore. We gotta balance and understand the different generations. We don't want that generation gap growing again. It's what we always had in the 70s. We say, the old people don't understand the young people, which was true. And the young people are often stupid. So again, we got to keep it in balance. More laws. Here's nukes. This was a story I missed in the last few days. We have this space nuke story that seems to me was kind of leaked out by the U.S. government. The U.S. government is facing a crisis because they need to put hundreds of billions of dollars into that war in Ukraine. And we have all the stories coming out about, the Ukraine is slipping and Russians gaining the upper hand. This is opposite the way the stories come out. When the money is flowing, it's like, oh, Ukraine is doing great and Russia's on its back foot. So again, it's a little hard to judge for us laymen's what what part of it is media cheerleading to support the U.S. presidency and what is the real story of what's going on. So when I started to see this stuff about the Russian having the space nukes, this was a few days ago. It seemed like to me almost like psyops. It was a story that was leaked halfway, so we would add on the most extreme assumptions to it possible, and it bolsters the case that you can easily make the case that why do we care about what's happening there? We're in big debt. We're putting money in to defend rich democracies that have plenty of money to do it. Some of the richest countries in the world, Sweden, Germany, and who cares about that? And wars are bad and people get killed in them. So against that, the answer is Russia is dangerous, and Russia has space nukes, and they killed that Navalny guy. They've fallen back into this terrible repression that in the 1990s the world thought was on the way out, and it was the end of history. That was a famous essay after the end of the Cold War by some guy. I've actually have it on my computer here, and it did posit that with the end of the Cold War there was the end of history and the dichotomy of the great nations, but of course that didn't end up that way, because we have the rise of we had Islamic extremism, and that was a reactionary result to the inevitable reforms that are happening in the Middle East. Because after the Cold War, only place in the world that was not liberated or modernized or brought into the international sphere of treaties and things, Middle East. So that area was experiencing that. And I just wanted to say, I know the guy who wrote that original essay, Something in the End of History, they said, we didn't mean really it was the end of history. It was they tried to equivocate it. But I think when you read it, there was a sense by a lot of people, and I don't think you have to be anyone special to know this, or an expert or a layman. Everyone, after the end of the Cold War, it did seem like for a time, wow, there's one superpower now, and it's impressing its footprint on the world, and everybody's going to join these international agreements. So, but see, we forgot about the whole Middle East. It's still not in the system, and a lot of reforms and modernization to take place. Half of college grads working jobs they don't. I don't think even when I went to an expensive school far from my home, and everyone was like, well, even the teachers back home, they were saying, well, it's so expensive, you should just go over here to IU or some state school, because the education you get there, you'll learn as much as you do here. It's just more expensive. That's not the point of college at all. The point of college, just like the point of the rest of school, is to prove you're not a moron, that you could sit in the chair and you can go all through all this study, and it proves you're a certain person of a certain standard of learning, and that you can do it and you have some conditioning in the world. So what I got from my Western University college years was I got to say I went to that college. So any job I went to, whether it was related to what I study or not, I said, I went to this college. And there's a lot of people said, oh, yes, I did too. You're hired. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for the name. So you might, the education might be the same or maybe even less than others, but you do get what you pay for. And the same thing with the degree. When you get a degree, ask any grown-up. It seems like no one talks to older people anymore. Hardly anybody is going to be working in what they got their degree into. It's just you go through the system, and once you have the degree, it shows you're a person of a certain standard and thus can be hired in certain jobs. And I'll tell you, I'm a person who's hired and fired a whole lot of people. I will tell you that the main thing you can never find exactly the person with the right degree for what you want to hire. You just have to find someone that you think is similar and has the ability to work their way into the job and has enthusiasm to do it. And it's very common. You just have to find someone near what you're looking for. So it's likely no one's ever going to be, I'm a degree in college and I do this in life. Plus your interests change. What you spend all that time studying for, it can sap the enthusiasm right out of you. Everything's become a psyop. I get worked up here, and I got to turn up the air conditioner. Interesting. This is true. The incredible skepticism on social media. Of course, this article misses the idea that people are aware of how partisan the media is. So because they can't trust the media anymore, especially people who lean right, they're saying more and more crazy things. And then we have the nature of the internet itself, which rewards people for saying stupid things and rewards them for clickbaity things. It's a tapestry of things that have caused this skepticism about what we hear in the world. This is sort of kind of why I'm doing this site or doing this podcast. I want to. I know that there's history behind. There's history or insight behind a lot of these stories that are never in the story. So, what else do we have? I don't know if I'm even allowed to say anything about this, and that's a problem too. All these, during the epidemic, all of the big sites, there was a whole case that went to the Supreme Court about this. We're told secretly by the White House there's certain things they want us to cooperate to not allow people to say. So it makes people skeptical. I'm even fully for masks. I don't want to breathe in. I don't know. It just makes me feel better, even if it's irrational. But I get all the new vaccines, but I don't think anybody should have been fired for not wanting to get a vaccine. And if there was a free flow of information, people would have been able to hit back against people who said crazy things about vaccines, and they were crazy. And I understand there's especially in these epoch defining big epidemics, importance to get people vaccinated, but I don't know if people should have lost their jobs over it, especially when they probably were hearing incorrect information, and they were hearing that, and that incorrect information was amplified because media outlets and social media outlets were trying to restrict it. If you try to censor stuff, it gives it more life. And that, I believe, is what happened to with the anti-vaxxer movement. Crazy as it is. Young people find their dreams and failures in Bangkok and then go on to the furthest places in search of something the modern world can no longer give. This is the story of There Are Still Unknown Places, my new novel on sale at Asia Books and on Kindle ebook. It's a tale for a new generation, disillusioned by the promises of the world, wanting to search for their destinies in far-off places. So that is my book. It hits on some of the themes that I focus on here. I mean, you feel, it's people who are disillusioned, as I say, with with the world, the promises of the world and their government, and they go on to the ends of the world, the ends of the earth. So, as I always say, don't go marching in anyone's parade and don't go down swinging for someone else's cause. Let's think about it first, and to join me again, and we'll understand the context of the news. I will see you tomorrow.